I said, "You're too beautiful to be alone." She whispered, "I wish it were you." I still remember the exact moment everything changed, because it began with a sentence I almost never said out loud. If I had stayed quiet that night, if I had simply finished my drink and walked away, my life would have followed the same lonely path it had been on for years. Instead, I looked at the woman sitting alone by the rain-speckled window of a small downtown bar, and smiled. "You're too beautiful to be alone." She didn't smile back. Instead, she looked into my eyes with a sadness so deep it seemed older than either of us. Then she whispered words that have echoed in my heart ever since. "I wish it were you." At first, I thought she'd mistaken me for someone else. I glanced behind me to make sure she wasn't talking to another man. She wasn't. Her eyes never left mine. The music around us faded into the background as silence stretched between us. "I'm sorry?" I asked. She blinked, almost as if she'd just realized she'd spoken aloud. "You don't know me," she said softly. "No, and I don't know you." "That's true." She gave a weak laugh. Then forget I said anything. Normally, I would have respected that. Normally, I'd nod politely, wish her a good evening, and return to my table. But something about the loneliness in her voice stopped me. "I'm Ethan," I said, holding out my hand. She stared at it for a moment before shaking it. "Claire, can I sit?" She hesitated, then she nodded. For the next few minutes, we talked about everything except the strange things she'd said. Children's librarian. I repaired historic houses. She loved old novels. I loved restoring forgotten places because, somehow, fixing broken buildings made me feel like I was fixing pieces of myself. She laughed at one of my terrible jokes. It was the first genuine smile I'd seen from her. It transformed her face completely. "You should smile more," I said. "I used to." "What changed?" She looked down at her untouched coffee. "Life." There was something final about the way she said it, like there wasn't a story she wanted to tell. So I didn't push. Instead, we spent 2 hours talking about books, music, travel dreams, embarrassing childhood memories, and our mutual hatred of raisins and cookies. It felt effortless, comfortable, familiar, as if we'd skipped years of awkward introductions. When the bartender announced last call, neither of us seemed ready to leave. Outside, rain still fell softly across the empty streets. "I had a nice time," I said. "So did I. I'd like to see you again." She looked away. "I don't think that's a good idea." She searched for words. "Can't." Before I could ask anything else, she stepped toward me. For a second, I thought she might hug me. Instead, she gently touched my arm. "Thank you for reminding me what normal feels like." Then she walked away. I watched until she disappeared around the corner. I never asked for her number. She never offered it. And somehow that bothered me more than it should have. For weeks afterward, I couldn't stop thinking about Claire. Not because she was beautiful. She was. But beauty fades. It was her sadness that stayed with me. I'd seen grief before. My mother carried it after Dad died. I'd carried it after losing my younger brother in a motorcycle accident 6 years earlier. Claire's eyes looked exactly like ours had. Eyes belonging to someone surviving instead of living. I figured I'd never see her again. Life has a strange sense of humor. 3 weeks later, I was delivering restored wooden shelves to the city's public library. As I carried the last section inside, I heard a familiar voice. "You." I turned. Claire stood there holding a stack of children's books. For the first time since we'd met, she looked genuinely surprised. "Ethan." I couldn't help smiling. "I guess fate likes libraries." "I guess it does." After my work was finished, she invited me for coffee across the street. This time, She didn't refuse when I asked for her number. Over the following months, our friendship grew naturally. Morning texts became afternoon phone calls. Coffee became dinner. Dinner became long walks through quiet parks. We learned each other's favorite songs, favorite foods, favorite fears. She loved thunderstorms, but hated fireworks. I hated flying, but secretly loved cheesy romantic movies. She teased me endlessly about that. You cried during that movie? I did not. Allergic to feelings? We laughed so hard people stared. For the first time in years, I felt genuinely happy. But there was one subject Claire always avoided: relationships. Every time conversation drifted there, she'd quietly change it. I respected her boundaries. Until one evening. We were sitting beside the river, watching boats drift beneath glowing city lights. "Can I ask something?" I said. She nodded. "Were you married?" Her smile disappeared. "Yes." I waited. She didn't continue. "What happened?" She took a slow breath. "My husband didn't die." I frowned. "He left." "I wasn't expecting that." "For someone else?" She nodded. "My younger sister." The words hit me harder than I expected. "They're together now." "I'm so sorry." "They've been married for almost 2 years." I couldn't imagine that kind of betrayal. "I loved them both," she whispered. "They were the two people I trusted most." Her voice cracked. "And they destroyed each other for me." I reached for her hand. "I don't think I'll ever recover." "You already are." She shook her head. "You don't see what happens after I leave you." "What do you mean?" "I go home." And neither of us spoke after that. Some wounds don't need advice. They only need someone willing to stay. So I stayed. Winter turned into spring. Spring became summer. Without realizing it, Claire became the first person I wanted to tell everything. When something funny happened, I called Claire. When work went well, I texted Claire. When I found an old bookstore, I thought of Claire. One afternoon while painting a porch, my friend Marcus climbed the ladder beside me. So, you're in love." I nearly dropped my paintbrush. "What? You smiled for 6 straight months." "I smile. Not like that." I stayed quiet. "You gonna tell her?" "I don't know." "Why?" "Because she's still healing." Marcus nodded. "Then don't rush her." Good advice. Hard advice. I waited. Another 4 months passed. Then everything changed again. Claire called me at 1:17 in the morning. She was crying. "I need you." "I'm coming." I didn't even change clothes. 20 minutes later, I found her sitting outside her apartment building barefoot. She looked shattered. "They came back." "Who?" "My ex, and my sister." "What happened?" "They're getting divorced." I frowned. "They wanted forgiveness." "What did you say?" She buried her face in my shoulder. "They acted like enough time had passed." I held her tighter. "They said families should heal." My jaw tightened. "They destroyed your family." "I know." She looked up at me with tears streaming down her face. "I wanted to forgive them. You don't have to tonight." "I don't know how." "You don't have to know." We sat there until sunrise. Sometimes healing isn't dramatic. Sometimes it's simply surviving one more night. Months later, Claire surprised me. "I met them." "You did?" She nodded. "I forgave them." I blinked. "You did?" "I forgave them. But I didn't invite them back into my life." I smiled. "That's different." "It is." I finally understood forgiveness isn't permission. I couldn't have been prouder. That afternoon, we visited the same little bar where we'd first met. We even sat at the same table. She looked around and laughed. "You know something?" "What?" "The first night you walked over here." "Ass." I almost didn't. "I know. You looked like you wanted to be left alone." "I did." So, why didn't you tell me to leave? She smiled, because I was hoping someone finally wouldn't. The words stayed with me all evening. As we stepped outside into another gentle rain, I realized I couldn't keep my feelings hidden anymore. Claire. She turned. I need to tell you something. She looked nervous. I love you. The rain seemed to stop. The city became perfectly quiet. She stared at me without speaking. Seconds felt like hours. Finally, she walked closer. So close, I could hear her breathing. I've been terrified of this moment. Why? Because if I loved you, I'll come back to matter. I'd have something to lose again. You'll always have that risk. I know. She rested her forehead against mine. But you're worth it. Then, she kissed me. It wasn't dramatic. There were no cheering crowds or movie music. Just rain, two hearts, and the quiet certainty that sometimes love arrives after you've stopped searching for it. A year later, we returned to that same bar on the anniversary of the night we met. We ordered the same drinks, sat in the same seats, laughed about how awkward we'd both been. Then Claire reached into her purse. She placed a tiny velvet box on the table. I stared. You beat me to it, I laughed, pulling an identical box from my jacket. Her eyes widened. No way. We both burst into laughter. Neither of us had planned that. We opened the boxes together. 2 rings. 2 proposals. 1 perfect coincidence. People around us applauded when they realized what was happening. Claire slipped my ring onto my finger. I placed hers on her hand. Then she leaned close enough that only I could hear. Remember what I whispered the first night? I could never forget. Back then, I wished it were you because I thought you were someone else. I blinked. What? The man sitting where you stood looked exactly like the version of the husband I'd always dreamed of. She squeezed my hand. But I was wrong. Wrong? I wasn't wishing for a stranger. She smiled the same beautiful smile I'd fallen in love with. I was wishing for the man you would become in my life. Looking around the bar where our story began, I realized something that every broken heart deserves to hear. Sometimes the right person doesn't rescue you. They simply sit beside you long enough for you to remember how to save yourself. And sometimes, one unexpected sentence spoken to a lonely stranger becomes the first page of the happiest chapter you'll ever live.